Hey everyone, happy Monday. Let's get to it. It is another edition of Ask Mike. But Mike, I got a question for you before we get into these.
Where have you been?
I went on vacation,
okay.
had a nice relaxing week off, but I missed you. I also missed your birthday. How was your birthday?
It was really good.
Good.
Had the whole family over, and
Yeah.
one of my daughters-in-law, it's her birthday too. So we both had a birthday, and I've got this old clock that my grandmother had, and it got passed to me, and it broke years ago, and my wife got it fixed for me.
Oh,
so
that's
it was
nice.
It's an old clock that gongs and things like that.
You get a cake?
Yes, well, a cookie.
Cookie cake, your favorite kind?
I don't know.
That's
Just
but
what
you
I
ate
got.
it. Great. That's great. Well, I'm glad you had a good birthday. All right, let's get into the questions now. Our first question is from Arky Redneck, who asks, what did you think of Wallace and Paulette going mid-second round of the draft? I thought they were projected late first or early second round.
It's kind of getting a little picky. It probably cost them a little bit of money, and maybe they could have gone earlier. But, man, I mean, for Caden Wallace, it couldn't have worked out any better, right? You think he likes going into an organization where he knows the president of the organization?
Yeah, that's pretty nice.
That's going to help.
Yeah.
And then for Razorback fans and for the Naturals, I don't know if it would be late next summer. I don't think it would happen this quick this summer, but maybe next summer at some point. He goes through Springdale.
Yeah.
You think that's not going to get Razorback fans out there? There have been a few ex-Razorbacks over there, but not many. And that would be nice.
Yeah.
Paulette, he's still going to make, what, $1 million, something like that. So I think that's all right. I think that the surprise to me was Robert Moore. And I second-guessed myself on him because if you'll remember, one of the things I said was, yeah, his hitting may have dropped off this year, but he's so good defensively. I still think he's an early pick. And then he made that statement or whatever he said to Dave Van Horn, which led all of us to believe that he might be coming back. And then I started thinking, well, maybe he's heard something. And I started reading some of these projections that people were making, and I'm thinking, well, maybe he's third round, fourth round. If it gets to fifth round, maybe he comes back. And all of that turned out to be nonsense. He went late second round, still going to make $1 million or so. So
Yeah.
he's okay.
Yeah.
Robert Moore came out ahead, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and guys are still rolling off the board. Jalen Battles just drafted in the 5th round. So there's some other guys and some names that could be called soon, right? S. Giles says the media keeps saying that Coach Musselman likes a 2nd or 8-man rotation. This new roster has maybe 10 or 11 guys who are real difference makers. Are 3 or 4 of them going to end up sitting on the bench like Vanover, Jackson, and K.K. Robinson did last year? Sounds like a waste of talent.
I think it would be wrong to assume that because
Yeah.
I don't think Musselman's ever had at least not here at Arkansas, and I don't think anywhere else he's had a lineup this talented. My observation about guys that have sat on the bench under him have been they weren't consistent. If you send somebody into the game late first half and he's a negative or same thing in second half, then at some point, I think you start saying to yourself, well, you know, I don't think he helps us. So I think a lot of this is going to depend on how talented some of those guys are. We're going to find out.
Yeah, well,
but I'm betting that some of these guys, 8th guy, 9th guy off the bench or whatever, is going to be better than what we've seen at the past, and therefore they may not sit as much as you think they would.
It'll be interesting to see because history has shown that Muss does go with about 7 or maybe 8 guys, and that's it. And he has made comments in the past that have said, you earn your spot in the summer for the most part. You're earning your spot in the summer, and if I don't play you, you know why. So it will be interesting to see. Here's the thing, if he does do this, he's going against everything he's done the past handful of years.
But I'm thinking maybe he will. It'll be interesting to watch this. And here's the other thing. He also game plans better than almost anybody, and he said who plays in certain games has to do with the opponent. So let's take, for instance, last year they had one guy 6'8" or taller. So that's not a hard decision to make about who your big is. But now he's got 4. Well, let's say they're going up against Kentucky and Oscar Shibwe, and I don't know what Muss will do. I mean, you'd have to break the whole team down to know this, but let's say he says, okay, we got to double team this guy at all times. So he's got 4 bigs. He could rotate in 2, rotate in 2 more, rotate those back, and he could do that the whole game. We don't know.
Yeah.
So that would be more playing time for those bigs. So I've said this before. When I look at Arkansas's roster right now, one of the guys, I look at who was inconsistent last year, who was inconsistent for 2 years. Devo. He's really good one day. Next game, maybe he kind of disappears. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on him to perform.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about he's a veteran coming back. That's good, but you can't come in and play well one week and then have no points or 2 points the next game, because I think that means there's too much talent in there to let him take up a spot on the floor when he's not performing.
It's a good point, yeah.
So, again, I think the pressure is going to be on each one of these guys to produce when they're out there. And if all of them are producing, then all of them play at some point. Now, I don't mean that he's giving everybody 20 minutes. That doesn't add up. But a guy might get 8 minutes instead of 2 if he's still performing off the bench.
Yeah, we know, we've seen there are programs around the country who play 10, 11 guys every single game, and they know that.
And you're saying you don't think he'll do that because of his history?
His history shows that that's not what he does.
Right.
So if he does do that, he's doing something new.
And it'll be interesting to see.
We'll see if it works. And that much talent, though, is not a bad problem to have.
Nope.
It's a good problem. All right, moving on. Hog says KJ Jefferson decided not to attend the Manning Academy reportedly so he could stay in Northwest Arkansas and work out with his receivers. What kind of workouts within rules are allowed, and do you think that was a good decision?
Well, yes, it's a good decision, because honestly, if Kendall Briles thought he should go, he would have gone. So he didn't go. So I think it's a good decision to do what your own quarterback's coach would advise you to do. But look, in the old days, it is true that coaches could not have any contact with players during the summer. Those rules have been modified. They don't work out with them a lot, but they do get a selected number of workouts to be on the field with them, working with them. And for that reason alone, I think it's good for him to stay here. But here's the other thing. There's no limit, except for the 20-hour rule, on what players can do in the summer. And they get together and do a lot of 7-on-7 stuff. And to me, you need KJ on campus with his receivers, because I think that's the biggest issue I see going into this fall, is how do they adjust with the new bunch of receivers? You're probably losing a component of your deep passing game. Mm-hmm. Do one or two of those receivers turn into a deep receiver? Do you become more of a mid-range passing game or whatever? And you know that we didn't really get a good look at the passing game this spring. The only time we really saw a lot of it was in that dopey spring, and whatever that was, and it was indoors, and it wasn't
inconsistent. It was weird. Yeah.
So, you know, that's one of the things I think should come out of media day. I don't know if it will, but on Wednesday when the Razorbacks are there, I would like to know what's that looking like this summer. So I think, yes, he needed to be here this summer.
All right, Lanning wants to say year 3 with Sam Pittman as the O-line coach under Bielema is when Arkansas began to dominate with the run game. I say the same thing happens in year 3 with Pitt as the head coach. What about you?
Yeah, I don't think it will be as dramatic as what you're talking about. That third year under Bielema with Pittman, that's when they really had that massive.
They had Alex Collins and Jonathan Williams over 1,000 yards that year.
Yeah, and they had the massive offensive line, and it was a good year. I think the offensive line will continue to improve under Pittman. I think as long as Kendall Briles is the offensive coordinator, they're still going to have a decent passing game. I don't think you're going to see a basic philosophy change this year, but I think what I would look for is what has Kendall Briles really complained about in the last 2 years? They don't make enough yards running on first down. If you run the ball and lose yards or get 1 or 2 yards and you throw a pass on second down, you're suddenly in a real bind on third down. So let's say you run it for 8 yards on first down, throw an incomplete pass on second down, you've still got 3rd and 2 as opposed to 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10. So that will be interesting to see if they change a philosophy and run better on first down. Mm-hmm. That would be one aspect of having a better offensive line. I think also you might see, here's another thing you might see. Remember how Bielema had this philosophy of if you have the lead in the second half, and this is when Pittman was there, if we have a 2-touchdown lead in the second half, let's go strictly running and burn up the clock if we can do it. Yep. That would be another aspect you would see. If this offensive line is good enough to do that, you get in the second half, you have a 2-touchdown lead, you may see them go run, trying to shorten the length of the game.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Hog T wants to know, what if they took the top 24 teams split between the Big Ten and the SEC, replicating the NFC and the AFC, break it into 8 and 4 team divisions. You could have a good conference schedule with no cupcakes, win your division, go to the playoffs for an 8-team playoff, or top 2 teams if you want a 16-team playoff.
Yeah, I think the way he words that is a little confusing. I think he's saying with if you have 2 big, gigantic conferences, the Big Ten and the SEC, each one of them would have 4 8-team divisions, which would be a total of 8 8-team divisions, which would be 64 teams.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I like that. I'm not sure I would totally favor it done that way, but let's just go with his suggestion. Here's what I like. I would go beyond one taking the champion of each of those divisions and put them in the playoff. I'd take the top 2, and that gives you 16 teams. This is what probably is not going to happen, because I saw a quote from Greg Sankey.
Yeah, there you go.
Get these names rolling around there. I saw a quote from Greg Sankey this morning where he was asked about the playoffs, and he said, even after all of this realignment takes place, he thinks they still should have a selection committee. That's where I disagree. I think if you take the top 2 teams out of each of these divisions, then you would end up with 16 teams. You would have no voting. I hate voting. You know that. I think it's stupid. You don't do it in high school. You don't do it in FCS. College football is the only place where, well, the NCAA basketball tournament does it. But I don't like voting. It's too subjective. Now, here was Sankey's argument. If you don't do it by voting, you don't get the top teams in there. And see, I don't care about that. You got these fans that's obsessed with having all, if it's an 8-team playoff or a 4-team playoff or a 16-team playoff, they want all of those teams to be the top whatever. If it's, let's say it's a 16-team playoff, they would want all 6, they'd want to go into the polls and get the top 16 teams. Why? What is wrong with having teams that aren't ranked, some of them even not ranked, if they won their division and they get in there and let them play, they could pull off an upset. It's just a matter of what your taste is. But I don't think it's that essential to have every team in that playoff be some kind of highly ranked team. I would love to see a team get in there and win it all just by getting hot. Like they, remember the year Butler almost won it all? Texas Tech almost won the NCAA basketball tournament?
Well, you had Cincinnati for the first time in the college football playoffs last year. Now they lost, but it was the first time a team that was not a Power 5 team got in.
And I like that. So where I would differ with a lot of people is I would make it, if you finish first or second in your 8-team division, then you get to go. Now, the other thing I would put in there is if you're in an 8-team division, you're going to play 7 teams in your division. You still got to play 5 crossover games. The way they would realign this, they wouldn't really be called crossover games. They'd be called non-conference games. But you're going to eliminate with this non-conference games with these mid-majors. You're going to be, Arkansas might play Clemson as a part of the 5 non-division games they're playing. And you might say, well, that'll ruin you. It might now, but if it doesn't count toward the playoff, making the playoffs in your division, then I think that's great. So we would have a lot of really cool games, crossover games that would be good for TV, because that's the other part of what this is supposed to be all about, is putting better games on TV every week.
Yep.
And so you'll have these, even these so-called non-conference games, which now become crossover games. You eliminate the rent-a-win games, and you get an Arkansas versus Clemson or an Arkansas versus Notre Dame or whatever, but it doesn't kill you to lose that game, because you're still, all you're trying to do is win your division or finish second in your division.
Yeah. All right, that's an interesting dynamic there, Mike. All right, a Hog fan in Austin asked, do you think the Texas Crybabies are going to get their way on penalties for flashing the upside-down hook 'em horn sign when they move to the SEC? The Big 12 caved on the issue. There have been any word from the SEC office of this nonsense. And I remember, wasn't it the College World Series where they told the teams they couldn't do that when they were like walking around and playing? And that was, the NCAA said you can't do the horns down.
Here's what the clarification was, and it's the Big 12 commissioner, and he got kind of panned on this. He's saying it's an interpretation thing with referees. And everybody's saying, well, now if you make it an interpretation, come on, that's crazy. No, if you listen to his explanation, here's what he was saying, Alyssa. If I'm a defensive end from Oklahoma and I rush the Texas quarterback and sack him, if I get up and do that right in his face, that's going to be a penalty. If I turn around and do it to my own teammates or flash it up into the stands to my own fans, that's not a penalty.
Because it's not taunting.
It
falls under
It all
taunting.
boils down to whether that's viewed as taunting.
Got it.
And I think that's the way the SEC is going to interpret this rule. People have forgotten, Sam Pittman was asked about this some time ago. You know what? Remember what he said? He said, I don't worry about that because I don't let my players do that. We do not taunt the opponent with gestures. So, you know, flashing that sign as a way of, it's the same thing. You've seen people do this, a dunk in basketball, and the guy's doing that. As long as you're not walking right up to the guy you just did it over, and you just turn around and do it to your own teammates, your fans, that's not taunting. That's just expressing emotion. So I have no problem with that interpretation, and I think the SEC will adopt it with Texas.
All right. Mousetown wants to know, is there any point to SEC Media Days? Seems like it's just a lot of talk without much substance. Well, it is talking season.
It is talking season. You know, my view of Media Days, it's all about the questions that are asked. There is a value to it if you get good questions that are, but here's been the problem with that thing all along. You and I go to Media Day.
I know where you're going.
You and I go to Media Day.
Yes.
What are we trying to do? Well, for one thing, we don't have any contact with the players or the coaches during the summer.
Right.
So this is our one chance to ask a lot of questions that we have in our mind. So we go in there armed with these questions, and instead, what do we get? Some yo-yo from a Birmingham newspaper station, a TV station, an intern who's been sent out there by his brain-dead news director who's bored on that day because Alabama's not at Media Days that day. And his attitude is, let's have some fun with this.
Yeah.
So the yo-yo is sitting there asking, you know.
Would you like bananas or oranges?
Yes, or Brett Bielema got asked one time, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be?
The look on Mike Irwin's face when we were sitting in that room and that question got asked, I thought he was going to hit somebody.
Well, I wasn't. You can ask the question. Do it on your own time. Don't cause somebody else not to get a question asked that's legitimate because you do that.
Yeah,
Now,
and for people who have never been, you're only in this room for them for 15 minutes.
Right.
I mean, it's a valuable 15 minutes. You've got about 25 people who want to ask a question. And so for time to be wasted on a question like that, it makes everyone else want to kind of like beat their head against the wall.
And it's sometimes not that dramatic, but it's sometimes opposing teams that don't cover that team, like let's say there's an LSU media person in there for Arkansas session, they're going to ask some basic rudimentary things that Arkansas fans already know about, and it's a waste of our time. Now, there's a solution for that, and you and I both know it. It's called the breakout room.
Yeah.
And I give Arkansas a lot of credit. I think Kevin Trainor may have started this, which is the idea after it's all over, they've got a room rented 2 or 3 floors above, and we all get in an elevator and go up there, and we get them one-on-one, and we get to ask the questions we want. I don't know if there's a breakout room in Atlanta. I don't know if they still do.
I think Arkansas does that as a courtesy for our media for that reason of you guys cover us every single day. We'll give you 10 minutes one-on-one.
That's really good.
Yeah.
That part makes it worthwhile. But yes, there is a purpose to it. It's to fill that black hole during the month of July. When this, as we sit here right now, there's less than 3 weeks to August camp. So by the time Arkansas goes on, it's 2 days from 2 weeks to August camp. So we're getting close. But you and I know we got to fill those 2 weeks. I don't have to worry about it next week because I'm on vacation. But you got to fill it. And having all of these quotes and all of this stuff over the next 2 weeks will help.
It is.
And the fans like it too. So there is a value to it. But certain people can screw it up.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Team Otis says, it is too hot. Are any Arkansas sports programs affected by the heat and having to shorten practices or take any precautions during this time? Rain, please come back.
The strength and conditioning people are so sophisticated these days. No, they know what to do. They figured out a long time ago that heat-related problems usually come from not allowing enough recovery time. I'm going to tell this quick story. I'm going to try to make it quick. When I was in high school, we had an off-season program, and every day we did a different thing. Well, all of them worked except 220 day. We'd run 6 220s in under 30 seconds. That sounds like easy to do, but the way the coaches structured it, we had a track around our football field, and you started on the 50-yard line, ran around to the other 50-yard line, and then you immediately had to walk back across, and the walk across was your recovery time. Well, there wasn't enough time. So when we got back over there, they immediately started us again. Well, as you got into the 4th and 5th rep on that, guys were getting really messed up. I later found out from a doctor, I described this to him, a really good sports medicine person. He said, you had oxygen deprivation. I said, what does that mean? He said, your lungs were not able to produce enough oxygen going into your blood, and so your blood did not have enough oxygen in it. Now, how do you feel? Have you ever been hit on the elbow and had your funny bone? They used to call it your funny bone. Try having your head like that. That's what it was like. Your head is like tingling.
Yeah.
You're like daffy. People have died from that.
Oh, yeah.
Now, we didn't understand what was happening to us, but I had a friend that walked out of the field house after that, and he was going to go home because he was sick, and a cop pulled him over because he ran a red light, just went right through it, and he was a real safe driver, and the cop goes up to him and goes, Eddie, why do you know you were, he goes, give me the ticket. And the guy goes, what? He goes, give me the ticket. Just give me the damn ticket. He gives him the ticket, and he just goes home because he wants to go home and get in bed because his head's going nuts. It happened to me one day, and I got in a shower and just sat down and turned cold water on my head for 20 minutes. The reason I tell this story is they don't do stuff like this anymore. They understand the problem. So, for instance, on a hot day this week, it's supposed to be over 100 degrees 2 or 3 times. If they're over there working out this week, they're not working out outdoors at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
They've got really nice facilities over there for basketball, baseball, and football.
If you go into that indoor football area and it's 100 degrees outside, I promise you it'll be 85 in there in the shade.
Still hot.
So it's hot, but it's not going to cause you heat-related problems. And they're going to give them enough recovery time. That's the key issue. It's not how hot it is. It's how much time you let them recover between running sessions.
Yeah. All right, about Otis Kirk's feature on Barry Odom's son, Gary Odom, being offered a scholarship to Arkansas and 5 other schools as a sophomore-to-be receiver quarterback at Shiloh Christian. Mark Turley says, well, of course he has offers. His dad is Barry Odom.
I suppose it was kind of trying to be a tongue-in-cheek or smart response, but the issue is that why he got offered? And I'm told that A&M offered him. If A&M offered him, he didn't just get an offer from Arkansas because he was Barry Odom's son. Now, he's a sophomore, so he's got 3 years left. Barry Odom may not even be here in 3 years. I think there's a chance he wouldn't be. He's looking for a head coaching job. So if he leaves, I don't know if Gary Odom comes here anyway or if he goes where Barry is. I don't know how that will work. But I just want to dispel the notion that he got that offer because he was Barry Odom's son, because I don't think that's the case. They're talking about using him over at Shiloh in the same way that Arkansas is going to use Malik Hornsby as a kind of a slot receiver who then on any given play can jump down at quarterback, and I guess the quarterback then becomes a receiver and you kind of fool the other team's defense. So that's something they're going to do this year at Arkansas. So if they had a high school kid that was doing that and felt like that was something they wanted to continue with, he'd be a good guy to bring in.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex Verhogs, 88, says, I'm thinking about going to another college football game during our bye week on October 22nd. What games on that weekend would be your top choices? That Ole Miss at LSU game sounds tempting. Surely the experience in Death Valley won't be too terrible as a neutral fan.
First of all, isn't this a cool idea?
Yeah.
If you're, I like it if you're a fan and Arkansas is not playing. Just go experience another stadium instead of always saying you got to be at Arkansas. I've looked at the schedule that week.
Okay.
There are 4 teams that have open dates, which means only 4 games are being played. And I looked down the schedule. That's clearly the best one available.
Yeah.
Because there's some really stinky games that week. So I think, I don't know, there are 2 or 3 that are just, I wouldn't want to watch them. So that's a good one to pick. Here's the thing, use common sense. LSU can be a very bad place to visit if you don't use common sense. So I would say this, don't show up wearing red and white or don't show up wearing Ole Miss's colors. Just
blend in.
Just wear neutral colors or show up wearing purple and gold, I don't care.
Yeah.
Just don't be goofy. Don't pull up and park with an Arkansas license plate. That would be a good thing not to do. If you get there and you're at a motel, call an Uber driver or a cab and go have somebody take you over there. When you get into the stadium, either be totally neutral, just sit there and watch the game in a kind of a clinical way, or become an LSU fan. Don't become an Ole Miss fan. These are just common sense
Hey,
things.
I was going to say, this is how to survive in Death Valley via Mike Irwin.
Yeah, it's not hard. There's just some rules that you need to follow. But I do think the concept is cool.
Yeah.
Now, if I was to pick a game and go watch, it wouldn't be that weekend.
I know.
You know which one it would be?
I cheated, and I know what I read it on the paper.
You know.
A&M, Alabama.
I would love to be at that game. I would love to be at that game personally.
October 8th. Where's Arkansas? October 8th.
I don't know, but I would love to be right behind A&M's bench, sitting right down low where I could get a good look at Jimbo Fisher.
I'm going to call an audible. Somebody tell me where Arkansas is on October 8th. I know it's right in front of Will here. Will, what do we have? Dang it. Man, if they were in Auburn, I'd say, Mike, we're going to hop in the car. We're driving to Tuscaloosa after Arkansas.
They may not be at the same time of the day. They'll have the schedule could come out. One could be an early afternoon game.
And we just hop in the car and just head on to Tuscaloosa.
But I would want to be right behind the bench, and I would want to have some binoculars where I could get even closer, and I want to be looking at Jimbo Fisher's face during that game because they are going to get slaughtered. It's going to be awesome. I'm not a big Alabama fan, but I will be that week.
Man, if that crowd is anything like it was, and again, this was my experience. I have not been to an LSU game or anything like that at Alabama, but the Alabama-Arkansas game last year in Tuscaloosa was insane. And it gives me goosebumps just thinking about it, what they do with the lights, and it's incredible. To be there at night. If that's not a night game, I'm going to be thoroughly disappointed because it needs to be a night game.
It's one of the best atmospheres out there.
And it needs to be against A&M. It'll be wild.
Especially after what happened last year and the way A&M's been bragging ever since and bragging about their recruiting, and then Dumbo Fisher says all that stuff about Nick Saban. I don't care what Nick Saban says. The man has won more national championships than any coach in the history of college. You don't disrespect a guy like that. You haven't proven that he's cheated. Nobody has. And I'm told that he personally doesn't do that there may be some boosters that do stuff. But so you don't act like he's just some guy sitting on the back of a turnip truck and you can make fun of him. Come on, Dumbo. Wake up.
Interesting. Yeah. All right, here we go. Moving on from that one. But that is fun. I have gone to a football game on a bye week, non-Arkansas related. Went to go see my cousin at Baylor, Texas Tech.
If you know somebody in the game, that's a lot of fun.
It was fun. All right. Cherie Clayton says, can't wait for the return of an officially licensed NCAA college football game next summer. Is it true that if I pick Arkansas, I will have the stats, images, and jersey numbers of players like KJ Jefferson and Jalen Catalon? With my superior coaching, I think I can win the SEC in the 2022 Hog roster.
Yeah, that's a nice concept, and it's going to sort of happen, I think, but this gets very complicated. Courtney explained all this because she's into the games and she gets these updates from EA Sports about how they're doing this. Now, this is a year-long process for developing this game. And one of the reasons is because they're in the process, they've hired a company, CLC Licensing, and that company is contacting all of the college schools that they want to have in this game and trying to get them to participate. And what they're saying is, if you participate, we will work out a deal where the school gets some money, the athletes get some money, but each one of these athletes have to approve it too. So if they take KJ Jefferson and put him on Arkansas's team, and you see his face and you see his number and you see his name, he's got to sign off on that. Now, here's what I would say. Who's going to turn that down? Seriously. If you're a player, you're going to turn down money for that? And how cool is it if now, let's say you're KJ and you're now in the NFL next year, after this year. It's still going to be cool to be with your buddies and they get out a video game and that's you running around playing Alabama. I mean, players love it. Coaches like it.
Yeah, because that game will be that game that way forever and ever and ever. It could be 10 years down the road and you stick in that game and you can be KJ Jefferson.
But it's very complicated.
Yeah.
Apparently 12 schools have said no, absolute no. One of them's Notre Dame, and supposedly another one is Clemson.
Is that surprising to anybody?
Why?
Dabo Swinney is so anti-NIL that does not surprise me.
Well, to me, this is the perfect use of NIL because it's what caused NIL in the first place. So what's wrong with athletes getting a little money and the school getting a little money off these video game sales?
I don't think
so. But 12 have said no. The only one name I have is Clemson and Notre Dame. But apparently there are several other schools that don't have an agreement with CLC yet. So if you don't have an agreement with them, you can't be a part of this. So the short answer to your story is this is still being developed. As far as I know, Arkansas is not one of those schools. So it sounds like you will be able to do all the things you're talking about. But until we get further along in the process and we find out the names of more schools that have participated and who are the athletes and all of that.
Yeah.
We don't know. But I'm telling you, this sounds like a really good, fun video game.
Yeah, it would be fun for sure. All right, a couple more. Here we go. TL Slayton says, I see where Gary Blair is getting put into the Razorback Hall of Honor. I know he won a national championship at Texas A&M. What was his biggest accomplishment at Arkansas?
Well, on the surface, it would be the 1998 Final Four. No other Arkansas women's team has ever been to the Final Four, and they lost to the national champions there, Tennessee. So all of that's good. But to me, his greatest contribution, his greatest accomplishment, and I got to get into this a little bit because it's one of these things I'm passionate about. He took women's basketball, which was nothing at this school. I used to go to women's games and you could sit there and count the number of people at games. It was bad. And he came in and changed all of that. Remember, this is when they made the switch over to Bud Walton, and all these people were saying, well, the women should stay in Barnhill because they can't fill up that big arena. And he went, nonsense, I can figure out a way to do it. So he started going to all these civic clubs and talking to them. He found a target audience, which was senior citizens. And here's the way he approached them. He said, hey, all these things you don't like about college athletics, players getting in trouble, bad academics, all this stuff you don't believe in, our girls go to school. They're good people. Come and watch them. And he sold them on the idea, and then he had this club that he belonged to. It was over on Off Crossover, Elks Club or something like that. And he would invite them once a week over for a big lunch to have lunch, and he'd bring the players over. And those senior citizens up in Bella Vista loved the team. So they start coming to games. And I'm sitting there. First year, there's 2,000 at a game. Next year, there's 4. Next year, there's 6. By the time he left here, they were getting 6,000 and 7,000 people in there for an SEC game. And the biggest accomplishment was the year they won the WNIT and had the championship in Bud Walton Arena. They had 14,500 people for a women's game.
Yeah.
That is mind-blowing. And so that, to me, is his value. And let me just say this. There was a big thing I watched yesterday on Title IX, and there was a lot of criticism. Some people saying men's sports is going away like wrestling and some of these sports because they have to get rid of them to do the balancing for Title IX. And I've talked to a lot of coaches in these so-called Olympic or spring sports that don't generate any revenue or much at all. And some of them see no responsibility in doing that. I'm just here to coach the team. Who shows up is their business. But the good ones do what Gary Blair did. They go out and get people to come. I think this thing in the fall with golf at the Blessings is a great idea because here you've got Johnny Tyson exposing those golfers to a home crowd. They get to go out there. Remember when we had the NCAA championships there? What a great thing that was. I think if I'm a coach of one of those sports, I want my athletes to get the feedback from fans. I don't want them out there playing in front of nobody. But how do you make that happen? Well, you've got to take the responsibility. You've got to figure out a way to market your team. And that's what Gary Blair did, and that was his greatest accomplishment.
Yeah, I mean, you see that, look at soccer and what Colby Hale's been able to do and grow that soccer program. It's sold out, Courtney Deifel,
has done.
Yeah.
I mean, she has created another major source of viewing for fans here in Northwest Arkansas. That is going to become a destination. I'm telling you. I saw it last year. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you're going to see 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people at a softball game.
Yeah, Bogle Park hosts the SECs this upcoming year too in 2023. It'll be fun. All right, final question here about last week's complaint that Courtney waves her arms too much on the air. Is this why you had me host today? So Courtney and I got to read about herself.
Handled it pretty well last week.
She waves her hands too much on the air. Hog House 2 has come to her defense and says, someone told Courtney Mims to continue to wave her arms as much as she wants. She is good at what she does.
The poor guy that asked that question.
Who says stuff like that? But
it was a guy on Hogville. Now, he's come back. He got hammered, and he's come back and apologized. And what he's basically said is, look, I didn't mean to disrespect anybody. It was just a feeling I had, but I apologize, okay? I will say this, it was great because we had fun with it.
Yeah.
I even suggested, I offered an explanation. Courtney's dad is a basketball coach, and who waves their arms more than basketball coaches? So she just grew up watching that and just copied it, right? And then I also made the suggestion that if we put weighted wristbands on her hands, on her wrists, that when she started to wave them up, she would feel the weight, and that would remind her, don't do that. Now, let me just say this. When I first got into television,
Yeah.
I used to get complaints. They said, you don't use your hands. You just sit here and do nothing. And you should use your hands to express yourself.
Yeah.
So maybe.
It's tough. It's tough. It might seem like nothing to sit up here and talk, but like like you said, like what do I do with my hands? And now I look weird because I'm so scared to move my hands. I don't move my hands and I look weird. So then I start moving my hands and I start moving my hands too much. When I first got into the business, I like wiggled. I don't know.
Well, you shouldn't be in a chair that wiggles.
But this chair doesn't wiggle very much, but I would like, I don't know. It was funny. I would like do my reports and I would like wiggle. And I don't know why, but it's sometimes a lot harder. You don't realize like I'm wiggling, but I don't subconsciously know that.
How about athletes that you interview and move around all the time? That's always a pain.
They do. They talk in and out of the things. All right, I got one more question for you, okay? I think we have time. SEC preseason lists come out this week at the end of SEC Media Days. Does KJ Jefferson deserve to be number 2 QB? Because I think we all know that Bryce Young is going to be number 1.
Yeah, I think so. Whether he will be or not, probably not, but I would put him there. I think he's paused to have a really, really good year. We saw him. People forget where he was this time a year ago. We had all kinds of questions about him. The only thing he'd really done is he'd had a pretty good game at Missouri. Other than that, it'd all been about Felipe Franks the year before.
Right.
So you look at what he accomplished last year, and if there's a natural progression, which I think there will be, the only question with him is how's he going to adapt to this new receiving core? But I think he'll get it down.
Where does the media put Arkansas? In the West?
Boy, that's a toughie. I've seen it all over the map. I've seen them down at 5th. I've seen them at 3rd. I don't think they'll be picked any higher than 3rd, but I would say
3 or 4.
I would say
That's what
4.
I'm thinking.
I think that's what they'll do.
3 or 4.
And here's what I would say about this. Whatever the only thing the SEC media poll ever gets right is picking Alabama, which is like a no-brainer, you know. The rest of that stuff is garbage.
Yeah.
It's always wrong. We don't know. We may think we know, and I say we, I'm including myself in all this group of people, but I will also say this, Alyssa. I've never one time voted in that thing in Birmingham because I think it's nonsense. So who cares what we think? We're not coaches. Really?
Yeah.
We know?
It's always been
I don't know.
more of a popularity
I could sit here and make a
contest, but
prediction.
we'll see.
It might be right. It might not be right. How would I know?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Looking forward to hearing from Sam Pittman on Wednesday. And Mike, you're on vacation next week, so no Ask Mike next Monday.
No Ask Mike. Have to go do without it for a week.
It's okay. It's all right. We will let you go on vacation.
2 weeks
You have
to build up questions.
You have earned it, good sir. That is going to do it for this week. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a good one.